All right, welcome everybody. I'm Patrick and this is Eric, and we're going to be chatting with you today about what you need to pack when you come to Southeast Alaska. And so let's dive right into it. We're going to go ahead and bring up a little slideshow to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about.
It can be a little bit daunting when you first look into going to Alaska. You look at all the things on on the web talking about how cold it is, how crazy it can be up here in Alaska. But many people look at the state as a whole as being very similar when it is actually extremely different from place to place depending on where you are. And since we think probably the majority of you will be visiting Southeast Alaska, it can be a very different place from the rest of Alaska.
So the first thing that we're going to chat about is the differences in environment. Typically that's between the summer and the winter, or what we're going to call as the light times and the dark times.
So starting off, a few things that are a little bit different about Southeast Alaska is that we're in a maritime climate, which means that we don't get the super bitter cold like the rest of Alaska, and we also don't get very warm in the summer. We don't really have a fire season like the rest of Alaska gets. And that maritime climate gives us a temperate rainforest, which means it often rains year-round, whether you're here in the summer or the winter. And that maritime climate means that we're in a very narrow temperature range. We barely exceed 70 degrees in the summer, and we barely get below freezing in the winter.
Awesome.
And also the humidity, because we're right on the ocean here, hovers right at around 82%. And which can make it feel a little bit warmer in the summer and a little bit cooler in the winter. And we just wanted to show you this kind of the average temperatures that go through Juneau here, as well as the average precipitation that we receive. You can see definitely around the end of the summer, early winter, that September, October time is easily our rainiest time of year in terms of precipitation, often raining down at the low elevations and snowing up high.
Right. And so during our dark times of October through March, we're getting, at the darkest period of the year, we're getting as little as 6.5 hours of sunlight during the day. And often it even feels like it's less than that. Well, especially for people who are, going to work midday. But if you do, are able to get out during the day, it's often cloudy. And so even if the sun is up over the mountains and on the horizon, it still doesn't shine through very brightly. So other things to think about is that, is it cold or is it not cold? And, typically when people think about Alaska, they're thinking, oh, it's just a barren wasteland full of ice. And that's, definitely not true, especially not in Southeast Alaska. And so it is cold per se, we're not some tropical rainforest, it's a temperate rainforest. And so we're not going to be, hanging in the 80s, 90s, and 100s like we're doing in Hawaii. But it is temperate in the sense that we're getting, close to freezing oftentimes during the winter time. Sometimes we'll get little spurts of cold air that comes in and it hangs around 15, 20 for a week or two, but really it doesn't get colder than that. It's possible, but it's not frequent. Whereas in interior Alaska, then it's often getting below zero a lot of times during the winter months.
During this winter, the darker side of things, we do have a chance to see the aurora borealis when it is not covered up by the clouds that roll in. But it also is a great time for skiing. There's heli skiing opportunities here, as well as a lot of backcountry skiing opportunities. With the number of mountains around, there's a tremendous opportunity to get out and enjoy the snow and get up and play a bit. We do have a small ski hill here as well called Eagle Crest that services, has a couple of chairlifts over on Douglas Island. and is pretty popular here among the locals.
So for happier, brighter times, I don't want to say happier, they're both very happy, but definitely brighter times is the summer months, and April through August. And you know, we're recording this in March, and even now we're seeing significant increase in daylight hours, and it definitely feels a lot more like spring and summer. And you know, the birds are flying back, and you know, we can feel it every day, although it's still rather chilly. You know, it's still hanging around freezing today, for instance, but that will slowly start to get warmer.
Yeah, this weekend is going to be the spring equinox, so we'll be finally approaching our halfway point towards equal light and dark. The summer also comes on. It tends to be kind of warm and wet. It can feel a little bit muggy at times with that high humidity, and the clouds tend to hold in all that warmth. And as our days start to get longer and longer, we get up to about 19 or so hours of daylight at the peak of summer, but it's often diffused by the clouds. So it's not, you know, typically bright, harsh sunlight that you get, but more of a diffused light, which is part of why photographers flock here so much.
So what do you really need to be in Southeast Alaska? What are the bare necessities? And yes, we mean bare, because we have bears in Alaska. So we'll be talking about both kinds.
So the thing that we probably can't stress enough is having a good rain jacket and a good pair of rain pants, and all things rain repellent. We don't mean that, you know, just having something that's water resistant or water, you know, that
weather resistant is a popular buzzword I see on a lot of jackets, which is it's still good. Just realize it's not waterproof.
Yeah, the best thing to test to make sure your jacket is really waterproof is to put it on and go stand in the shower for a while. That's really the only way you're going to be able to do it, because the thing with rain here is it tends to just kind of drizzle and set out, and when you're out hiking or sweating, you can often saturate a lot of those water resistant linings and coats, and when you do that, then they're as good as wet from the inside out. So that you want to make sure that you have a good jacket that you know, can handle whatever activity you're going to be doing. It's definitely best to take it out for a few trial runs wherever you are before you come up to Alaska, because bringing a jacket here and finding out that it's not as water resistant as you thought is not good for a long trip.
Yeah.
The next thing underneath your layer that you want to make sure you have is a good synthetic or wool layer, something that dries quickly, that is warm when it's wet. Cotton kills. Do not wear cotton underneath your clothes. That is a very, very poor layer. It stays wet. It seeps all the heat out of your body when it gets wet. And so you want to make sure that you have a good underlayer, something that, you know, when you do sweat, if you are working hard underneath that rain jacket, it's going to take that moisture away from your skin and keep it off of your jacket as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, for those synthetic layers, it's polyester, it's nylon, and you know, these are materials that aren't going to hold water, you know, when they get wet, and so they're going to also insulate heat. That being said, you know, Southeast Alaska does have some nice restaurants and nice bars and nice venues that you can go spend your time in, and so that doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't bring you know, other materials like cotton. You know, it's nice to wear a pair of jeans when you're at the bar hanging out with your friends, and that's the reality. And so, you know, bring a pair of jeans or two when you know you're going to be indoors, away from the weather, and you know, for just comfort's sake.
Also, many of you will likely be coming up by cruise ship, and there's lots of venues on the cruise ships, such as dress-ups and formal nights and events and things that you may want to have something other than your outdoor gear, although we don't really understand that.
But so based on that, we are going to talk a lot about what it means to be outdoors in Southeast Alaska is going to be our primary focus. And that brings us to our next point, is waterproof footwear. And I have a slide for that. And here's good waterproof footwear in Southeast Alaska. The left photo are the go-to extra tough boots that many people have started to hear about. And that's just become an icon of Alaska. It's kind of a fashion statement in a lot of ways. And so you don't necessarily need to have extra toughs per se, but you need to have waterproof boots. We suggest it. It's not absolutely essential. They are kind of expensive. You know, the really good pairs are, you know, around $100. But we wear ours like everywhere. And it's become acceptable footwear, you know, for even
weddings,
formal events, weddings, exactly. Any kind of outing, you know, for the locals, extra toughs is totally acceptable, and that's how you fit in.
And really, any sort of kind of rubber rain boot is nice. You know, if you're not doing really intense hiking, if it's just for getting around town or whatever. There's a lot of other options for rubber boots. Where extra toughs tend to excel is their sole is a little bit better than most other rubber boots I've found. I haven't really quite found a replacement yet for their traction over wet surfaces, such as, you know, wet rocks and stream beds and things.
But a lot of you are already going to have more traditional, you know, water resistant hiking boots or hiking shoes. And those will get the job done. You know, you just have to go in with proper expectations, which is even though they're water resistant, odds are your socks are going to get wet. And so as far as traction wise, yeah, they're prime. They're going to get the job done, and they're going to, you know, keep you safe. But just go in knowing that, especially on a rainy day, you're probably your socks are probably still going to get wet.
Yeah, no matter how water resistant they say they are, the Gore-Tex, it's, you know, it's always cool. They have them in the box, in the boot, you know, in the water, showing that they're dry on the inside, and it's really cool. But you know, the problem is that oftentimes you're walking through lots of water, and once that water gets into your boot, then it doesn't often get out very easily. And you know, unless you're having really high boots, they don't tend to dry out. So if you are going to bring a standard pair of boots, know that they're probably going to get wet, and you might want to bring some sort of boot drying kit, especially if you're going to be staying at a hotel or on a cruise ship. A little pair of drying sticks goes a long way to be able to plug in and have your boots dry in the morning so you can go out on another adventure.
And there's nothing worse than wet feet right at the beginning of a day. That is the truth. So yeah, you know, with that brings us back to the point of, you know, having synthetic or wool socks, you know, especially. It's going to be so much more comfortable than having cotton or even polyester socks they're just not as good as the wool. So I'd say wool socks all the way. It never really gets too hot for wool here, and you can get thinner wool socks. You know, Smart Wool is a great example. You know, definitely recommend going that route. So the last pair of footwear that we often see people bring on the trails is the infamous flip-flops. And this is what not to do. So flip-flops, they don't have good traction. They aren't insulating your foot from the wet water all around, and you know, they're just rather unsafe. So we recommend, you know, having, you know, enclosed shoes while you're on the trails, and you know, they're good if you're hanging out at the beach. And we're a coastal, we have some beach communities here which are nice, but you know, just, I'm not saying don't bring them, I'm just saying make sure you wear them at the right time, and you know, make sure it's appropriate for the activities you're doing.
On to the next. So we just a little bit of the accessories for what, you know, little things you might want to bring while you're you know, not out on the trail, when you're back at home and you're trying to organize stuff or you're trying to pack stuff for the day. Definitely some toiletries, but you know, you have to carry around whatever you bring with you. So if you bring a whole bunch of toiletries, you know, this is vacation. You know, we would suggest less is more when you're.
And this is also Alaska, and a lot of people here, they're not super concerned about their image, and so maybe you don't need all that hair gel and mousse and a lot of the primping items that you typically would use at home. Understandable if, you know, if you're on the cruise ship and you have a lot of these formal nights, maybe those are essential items. But you can definitely think twice about whether a lot of the toiletry items that you typically bring, to those nice resorts are really necessary, in Alaska. Focus on the nature, and focus on just being a part of it, as opposed to just trying to look good for everyone else, because, everyone here is, about the nature and, fully experiencing it. But once you get out into nature, you are definitely going to want to have a day pack for a lot of your items, or just walking around the small towns. You want to have a little day pack or a tote bag, which is great if you're not really doing any hiking and you're just going around to all the gift shop locations and to, certain restaurants. Just having a tote bag to carry your items works great.
Along with that day pack, plastic bags are a great thing to have, like a freezer bag or whatever that you can toss wet items in, or important like electronics and things like that. It's also nice to be able to kind of separate things out within your pack. There's lots of little like dry stuff sacks also as well that are nice. You can get small ones that you can kind of sort stuff within your pack for, depending on what kind of items you're bringing with you and how long you'll be out. Definitely a nice way to keep things dry, because if it can't get wet, you should probably make sure that it's doubly protected. Even if your pack is waterproof, you open it up and it's pouring rain, water can get inside. The second and third layers of water protection are a good idea.
Absolutely. And when you're here, we live in a modern day where electronics are an essential part of our life. And, thankfully, smartphones have replaced a lot of the electronics we typically bring. And so camera, well, that can be, embedded into your smartphone. And so perhaps you just, want to bring your phone, and maybe you have an external camera that you want to bring. We encourage you to bring in that, because there is phenomenal photography opportunities out here, to the point where it's like you can point your camera in almost any direction and take a wonderful shot. But that shot is only going to be useful and possible if you have a charged battery. And so whether it's, extra AA or AAA, or just, other external batteries that come with your device, or if it's a USB powered device, I definitely suggest going and purchasing a USB battery charger. Yep. Where you're just going to be able to plug in your device wherever you're at, and you're going to be able to charge on the go as well as use actively. And so there's lots of those available on Amazon, or a lot of the electronic stores. You can get them at your grocery stores, and we're going to have a full list of items that we're going to suggest on the blog post for this webinar.
While a smartphone often will have a clock on it as well, we highly suggest a watch, some sort of secondary timepiece. A lot of times you're going to be on a crunch, especially if you're on a cruise. You got to be back on your ship when it's ready to go. Important to have your watch and have it set to Alaskan time while you're in Alaska.
Being in Alaska during the summertime, you kind of lose track of time. It's like being in a casino, maybe on your cruise ship or at Vegas, in the sense that it's pretty consistently light out the entire time. And that makes it really easy to get lost in time. And so, we will be on hikes out here, and we're looking at our watch and we're like, oh my goodness, it's 10 p.m., but it's still really bright. And so it's kind of trippy to the mind to kind of grasp all this. And so it's important to have a watch, or some type of alarm. You can use your smart device, if that's what you got. Just be aware that you need to have a time telling device to keep you on track and keep you on schedule, especially when you're on the cruise ships and you have to make it back to port in time in order to get on, not get left behind. So with all this, carry waterproof case for it. And for your smartphone, you can get waterproof cases that you can put your smartphone in, that you can function, or you can utilize your phone while it's in the case. So it's a completely clear case, and it does wonders. Or if you just happen to spend the extra money, usually they cost anywhere from $50 to $100, maybe like an OtterBox case for your device. So it is fully waterproof. And that gets the job done too, because it might be downpouring and you're going to want to use your devices. And so it's nice to really be able to use those even in the rain.
All right, so getting out and getting wild, we are quite adventurous here in Southeast, and that's what draws a lot of people to Southeast Alaska and Alaska in general. And it's important when you're getting out in the wild to be prepared for the activities that you're going to be planning. We definitely suggest that it's easy to look at everything you want to do and to pack for everything that you want that you could possibly encounter. And I think one of the best suggestions in terms of packing is to really hone in on the things that you want to do and not to overcomplicate what you might possibly do, because you could come here and spend a lifetime, as we likely will, adventuring and getting out, and you can do different mountains and different adventures and different activities every day and still not get to all of them. So pick the things that you are interested in and you want to do and pack accordingly.
That may be, the general safety items that you're going to need. We'll just, start with one. In Southeast Alaska, depending on where you're at, it changes on density, but bear spray is always a good idea to have on hand if you're out on your own and who you're with doesn't already have this gear.
Bear spray is the most effective. It may be hard to, if you have to get it on or off a cruise ship, it can be difficult, but there's places you can rent them around most towns in Southeast Alaska. If you go out with a guided group, they're almost always going to have bear spray with the guides. And this bear spray, it isn't a bear repellent. It's important to know how to use it ahead of time. It is only a last ditch effort emergency. There's a lot of protocol understanding bears. There's a lot of good, useful information online through the National Forest Service and the National Park Service. If you, look up talking about how to work with bears, oftentimes just talking to bears is the best thing you can do. We want to avoid having to use this at all costs, but when it comes between your life and, and the situation that you're in, bear spray is definitely important to have and have ready. The next thing on is a first aid kit. The first aid kits that we often suggest is the Adventure 2.0. If you look it up, you can find it in most places like Amazon or online. They're small, they're compact, they come they have everything in it already. They have a list of what's in it on the back so that if somebody else has to use it and you happen to have it, they can find what's in it. They pack really light. They're definitely important to have if you're going to be getting out and going hiking or paddling or fishing or hunting or whatever it might be. It's a good starter kit for day trips. Another thing which you might want to consider if you're going to be up here spending longer periods of time in the outdoors, if you're going to be getting out for multiple day trips, whether that's packing or pack rafting or kayaking or skiing or whatever it might be, you might want to consider something like a personal location beacon. These beacons come in a lot of different types. The one that we use is the Fast Find 220. And they have a series of arrays of satellite and GPS systems that when you end up in an emergency that you need help, you need somebody to find you, they have a location, both long range and short range, so that people can locate you if you need to be rescued. It's a nice addition to have, especially if you're traveling on your own, which we see more and more of these days. It's a nice companion to have with you.
For navigation, there's a couple ways you can do this. The most typical these days is to just have maps on your smartphone, and the important factor there is to make sure that they're offline maps and not necessarily ones that are only accessible online, like Google Maps, Apple Maps. Those are typically, you have to have a data feed in order to utilize those. So make sure you get an app that you can actually take those offline, and you can still track your coordinates of where you're going. And when you are at a trailhead and other significant points along the way, make a little checkpoint in your device so that you can come back to that later in the event you get lost. But let's say your phone dies or you don't have that ability. It's always nice to still have a traditional compass, a paper map, with you, especially if you're in the outdoors for multiple days or going on a route that you're just not familiar with. I expect most people visiting aren't familiar with the territory, and so they should have those offline methods, the paper map and a compass, in order to make their way through the terrain as well.
And in most of the places in Southeast, they have pretty comprehensive trail maps. Juneau especially has a really nice map you can get downtown, or most places that's a water resistant, laminate material that you can pack along with you. And, they can be kind of big and cumbersome, but, you just pack them away. You even put them in the first aid kit, in case you have an emergency that, for whatever reason, the phone isn't working or your GPS isn't working. This way you have that backup at least, and a souvenir for whenever you get home.
Absolutely. Food. Let's be real. We're human beings, and food and water, and so we have to carry the proper amounts of food with us. And so whether that's sandwiches, so turkey sandwiches, PB&J, maybe you're getting something at the deli beforehand. Just make sure you have that on hand, or trail mix. It's something to keep you sustained while you're on the go.
And even if you think that you're just going to be out for a little while and you're not going very far, it's better off to just, pack a candy bar, granola bar, something that if you end up spending a longer time out than you intended, you will almost always not worry about the extra weight of having that small bar with you or something. Because just a little bit of food can go a long ways to making a trip a whole lot better. If you're out hiking and suddenly you want to go explore somewhere else, but you didn't bring food with you, it's better off to have it. The last thing we put on this list is a headlamp. And that may seem a little bit silly, especially if you're coming here in the summer and we just talked about long hours of daylight. But one of the crazy things here is that if you are out and you end up, spending a long time out and you're in the woods overnight, these woods actually get really dark in the evenings and at night, even in the summer. They can block out a lot of sunlight, and if you're, romping through some really thick brush, it can get really difficult to see where you're going. And while most of you will probably just be here for day trips, headlamps can be helpful if you're, you're looking for stuff in a pack even, because a lot of times, even though it's sunny out, it's cloudy as well. And so if you end up in the woods somewhere, it can be dark enough that a headlamp is a nice thing to have. And if for, again, emergency wise, you end up out having to stay overnight somewhere or something, it's better than having to grovel your way through the forest than to just have a headlamp. Usually the batteries last a real long time. There's some amazing ones out there now that can go for weeks on end on the battery that they have.
If you're not going to bring a headlamp, and because you're thinking, oh, I got a flashlight on my phone, well, just know that those lights on the phone suck up battery quick. So make sure you got some extra power for your phone if that is your intended headlamp, so to speak. All right, moving on.
All right, we're gonna kind of breeze through some typical common activities here that you can, if you have questions about something specific, we'd be happy to cover more in depth. Probably the most popular thing people end up doing here, especially in Juneau, is hiking. And so part of hiking, we talked about having the essential footwear already. Really important for your layered clothing. Maps, we touched on, is important for a lot of these activities. Some people really enjoy having trekking poles. Some of the terrain's kind of tough around here for using trekking poles, but for those of you who are more comfortable with them, definitely a good thing to have along. And again, of course, water and food. So for, if you're planning on going out pack rafting or kayaking or, canoeing or rowing or whatever your method of water travel might be, definitely you can get life jackets here in town. You can rent stuff, but if you're planning on doing this for a long trip, it's probably best to have your own. Definitely a wetsuit or a dry suit. May seem a little overkill even in the summer when it's warm out, but this water here, it doesn't get much above 50. I think we got to like 50, 54, 55 last year, which doesn't give you a whole lot of time. If you end up capsizing, we definitely had some people that got into some serious trouble last year. Middle of summer, capsized and had to be rescued, and were all hypothermic. Had to stay in the hospital for quite a while. So it's even if it's warm in the air, it's not warm in the water, which means that you probably want some paddling gloves, because that water can get cold, especially if it's windy. A marine radio is important to have. There's a lot of boat traffic out on the water. Usually a marine radio, you can contact somebody pretty easily if you need to. Charts and tide charts are very important here. We get super, super big tides. We average about 16 feet on average for our tide difference between high and low tide, which can mean the difference between you getting beached and not being able to get through some islands or a channel, or, you know, or having to do a really long land crossing that you weren't anticipating.
For photography, we talked earlier about how it's absolutely almost impossible to take a bad picture in Southeast Alaska. And, you know, but having the gear to capture those moments is what's essential. And so obviously you'll need your camera. If that's a smartphone, great. If it's a, you know, another external device, an SLR camera, you know, have the proper gear to go with that. You'll need extra batteries. Especially these days, a lot of our cameras also do video, and that'll suck it up even quicker. You'll be taking a lot of shots, bring extra memory cards, have your charger available. In fact, you know, and then a lot of our devices are, you could get like an external battery that can actually charge any device. Charge All is a brand that we use that you can plug any device into to make it charge. It has a typical wall outlet that you can utilize. Waterproof cases for all these is really important. For our SLR cameras, we have, you know, little $10 plastic sleeves that we put ours into as just a cheap way to make sure that the cameras are protected and then we can still actively use them even when it's raining. For, you know, the water float, especially useful on small cameras. GoPros are really easy to lose in the water. A lot of times you can get a little float to attach onto them. So if you're paddling or if you're out on a whale watching tour or anything like that, and something bumps and it falls in the water, at least there's some hope that maybe you can recover it, not just for the camera, but for the shots on the camera. You know, that was always the biggest thing when I lost a camera. It was never about the camera itself. It was just the complete bummer that I actually lost all the photos that went with it. And so, yeah, then we have, you know, alternate lenses that you may use if you're a professional photographer. If you consider yourself a great amateur photographer, you definitely know this, and I'm sure you have your gear list to go with it. And, you know, you're going to be out for a while. And so, you know, have your computer or some type of drive available where you can back up your photos, and don't wait until you get home at the end of your trip before offloading your photos from your camera device.
Yeah, and some people think, you know, with memory cards, they could just buy a really big memory card, you know, buy 128 gig and you'll never fill it up. And I really, you know, advise heavily against this, because what happens, you know, that one memory card, you have something happen to it, it burns, you know, burns out, you know, you lose the camera like Patrick was talking about, or whatever. For whatever reason, it's better to have multiple cards. If there's, you know, have multiple smaller cards than one massive card. And, you know, change them out often. You know, make sure that you have a good safe place that's separate from your camera. And, you know, especially if you're in a hotel or you have a separate room, keep some cards there and some cards with you. So this way, the shots you shot from the day before, if something happens, you don't lose everything.
Awesome.
So for skiing, if you're going to be coming in the winter, skiing is probably one of the most popular things to get out and do in the winter here. Whether it's skiing or snowboarding or snowshoeing, getting up and exploring in the snow in general. If you're coming here for heli skiing or just to, you know, as a family vacation to come and enjoy Southeast a little bit. If you're going to go out on your own, just make sure that you know, if you're well assessed with avalanche gear, make sure you have an avalanche beacon, a probe, a shovel, skins, a ski day pack, all those essentials, and double and triple check before you take off and go get out into the backcountry. So fishing is obviously quite popular here in Southeast. We have a tremendous fishing area, both fly fishing and sea fishing. And you will need to have a license if you're coming, especially most of you will be coming from out of state. And it can be an expensive license to get for fishing, but you do have to have it. If you're going with a guided group, they're often going to supply those licenses for you.
Usually it's still an added fee. It might be added as part of the tour, but make sure to check beforehand so it's not a surprise.
Yeah, and if you plan on, if you're not going to be fishing from a boat, definitely remember to bring your waders and pole. There's a lot of good fly shops in town if you're interested in, well, a lot of good fishing shops in general in town. It's worth a call to ask them what weight pole you might need for what fish you're looking at going for. If you're coming up on your own, they're almost always more than happy to fill you in on the things that you might need or what they can provide.
If you do happen to be coming into Juneau per se, we have lots of roads. Actually, this is true for all the Southeast towns, especially if you're coming in on like a ferry. You can load a bike up on a ferry and you'll be hitting a lot of little towns on your way up the Southeast Passage, Inside Passage. And you can take your bike and you can just start rolling into town and give yourself a little biking tour along the way. Or even from a cruise ship, some of the towns, the bigger ones, Ketchikan, Juneau, maybe Skagway, they have, they'll have bike shops that you can go and you can rent bikes to get around town and, kind of explore and do your thing. There's also lots of tours that offer biking opportunities as well. And so when you're on these, it's just like at home, it's no different. Get a good bike, if you're road biking is probably going to be the most popular. You're not going to do a ton of off-roading. We do have trails where you can do biking, and for that, have a good mountain bike. Then have water with you, have your helmet, be safe, and if there's any incidents while you're on your way, have a patch kit to be able to fix it.
And prepare to be wet.
Prepare to be wet.
Very wet ride.
Everything, all activities we've talked about, come with bringing rain jackets, rain pants. And just, the expectation of getting wet, even if it's a beautiful day out, stuff can still roll in and you never know beforehand. And so you want to be prepared for it.
Well, last but not least is camping. So if you're going to be coming up here and spending multiple days out, some popular trips are the ice fields. People get dropped off and ski back on the ice field. People get dropped out in Glacier Bay and paddle around for a while. There's a fair amount of hiking, but there's not a whole lot of through hiking here because we're pretty sandwiched between ice fields, mountains, and the ocean. So typically, if you're camping, you're probably going to be paddling or you're going to be, hitting up ice. But if you're planning just a couple of short trips, there are some beautiful trails to get out and camp on. And something to remember too, if you're going to be here for a while, there's a lot of state cabins here that you can rent out a cabin for a day. They do go rather quickly. You probably have to look about 6 months in advance to get most of them, especially during the summer months. But that being said, if you're going to be camping off, obviously you want to make sure you have a tent and try to avoid down for clothes as well. I know down, it compacts really nice. It's really wonderful to have with you, but if it gets wet here, you're going to be pretty miserable. So definitely try to stick to a synthetic sleeping bag of some kind. Definitely not any kind of cloth or cotton style sleeping bag. Obviously, you'll need a camping stove of some type in your cooking supplies, as well as always, a headlamp, pocket knife, insect repellent. Although our mosquitoes aren't very bad here, we don't really get intense, crazy mosquitoes like the interior does. They are still around, and more likely than not, if you're going to be kayak camping, or anywhere on a beach, what we do get here that are really bad are no-see-ums, which if you're not familiar with no-see-ums, they're these tiny black flies that you almost can't see, and they have a pretty mean bite, and they definitely are around all the beaches. So it may seem kind of funny too, but sunblock is important, especially if you're going to be up in the mountains. The sun can be pretty intense up high. Even on a cloudy day, it doesn't stop a lot of the UV from coming through. And food, of course, important, I guess, for cooking if you're bringing a camp stove. But definitely food, snack food along the way. And it's definitely worth having a water purifier of some sort. Although our water is pretty amazingly clean here, we also have, a fair amount of mammal activity up and around a lot of the mountains. And so it's definitely not worth, risking being out and not having clean water.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody. That concludes our comprehensive checklist. And we're going to have a blog post that goes into even more detail about a lot of these items that you can look at and view. And we really encourage everybody to reach out to us and ask questions if you have any. And so we're going to switch it back to us. And so there we are. And so, yeah, if you have questions going into the future, let us know. We're happy to help out and advise you, whether you're coming up on cruise ship, whether you're coming on a ferry, say multiple days, by plane. And yeah, feel free to reach out. We're an open book.
Yeah.
And so that's about it. We will look forward to hearing more, and we really thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Adventure on.